Hello, my name is Jay Townley. I'm a founding partner of Human Powered Solutions, and we put together this presentation specifically for the Cabda online event. What we're doing here is looking at predictions for 2021 and 2022. The subhead, as you can see on the screen, is what does the future hold for the American bicycle and e-bike business? And we put this together specifically for specialty bicycle retailers. Now, this is not a long, detailed presentation, but it is heavy on verbiage. So we want to be sure that you're aware. When we get to the end, we'll give you information on how you can contact us. And I am willing to certainly answer questions as we go forward. Now, we've said 2021 and 22 because we feel that these 2 years will merge, and we'll show you why. But let's essentially look at the current situation, what's going on right now. And you know most, if not all of this. The independent dealer channel, its unit sales are up. We think we'll be up 53% by the time we get to the end of the year. And by the way, the industry has 9-month figures right now. We're waiting for 12 months. So we are looking at a year where IBD unit sales be up over 50% from 2019. Retail dollars up 73% from 2019, with an average unit value that's increased by 12%. The mass unit sales, and this is also referred to as the rest of the market, is looking like it'll be up about 45% in units. Retail dollars up 74%, and the average unit value up by 20%. Now, this is all based on unit imports being up about 20%. And I'm going to come back to this, but I want to point out very clearly, we are an import-dependent industry. And the latest numbers show that 85 to 87% of all of the bicycles imported into the United States in 2020 originated in China, despite the punitive tariffs and the tariff issues that went on during the course of 2019 and 2020. Now, the other piece to be very aware of as to what's going on right now is wholesale unit inventory is less than 1 month on hand, and this is throughout the world. And this information, by the way, I thank Bob Markovicius from Specialized for providing most of it, and some of it coming from People for Bikes. And this last point is extremely important. Wholesale unit inventory is less than 1 month on hand worldwide. On-demand inventory literally does not exist in this industry at this point in time. And it's not just the United States, it's anywhere in the world. So what we're seeing in the United States relative to demand is what the rest of the world is seeing as well. I'm going to return to the inventory as we get to the predictions here, but I want to point out that we believe that a great deal of the inventory that was available as consumer demand ramped up during the pandemic at the early part of 2020 and throughout last year into this year was the inventory that was being held by bike shops in the United States, not just what was in wholesale or brand inventory, but what bike shops had in their inventory. Now, just hold on to that point. We'll explain why we think it's important. Now, here's the rest of the current situation. Again, you've seen this in the trade press, in bicycle retailer and industry news. You've heard it in presentations. You've heard it from your sales reps. The IBD lead time is pushing 10 to 12 months at this point. You place an order with a brand, and small to mid-sized brands may have a little flex here, but essentially the big brands have all moved into the 10 to 12 month window for delivery on orders placed today. You've also experienced, starting with the end of last year into the first quarter of this year, a wave of price increases that ripple through the channel. And those obviously are going to show up at retail. And 25% punitive tariffs on Chinese imports, while it wasn't, sure, we weren't quite sure what was happening in late December, they went back into effect on the 31st of December, 2020. So I'll repeat. For bicycles imported from China, the 25% punitive tariffs that had been suspended went back into effect. The USTR under the previous administration, the United States Special Trade Rep, did nothing to extend them, said nothing about it, ignored over 600 companies that had written to the USTR asking, please, those exemptions, extend them, continue them so we don't pay the punitive tariff on top of regular tariffs. Those 25% punitives went into effect. That's on e-bikes, certain e-bike componentry, and then all bicycles. There's a container shortage, which you probably heard of in different ways. Container shortage is worldwide. It's not just the United States, but there's a shortage of containers. There's a shortage of ships at this point to carry container goods. And that doesn't mean there's fewer than there were last year. It's as many as, according to the shipping industry, has been available. The fact is there's that much volume in goods coming from mainland China and Asia in general, across Southeast Asia, China, Taiwan, Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, coming into the United States. In addition, there's delays at ports. One of our senior associates, Dave Carnebog, who recently joined us, showed us a computer modeling that he's got where you can go on a screen through an app and you can see the transponders for all of the ships that are waiting to get through the Suez Canal or waiting to get into the port of Los Angeles or the port of Long Beach or the port of San Diego. And it's amazing because there are so many ships waiting to get into the ports of the United States that it's causing a logjam. There's delays. You also have delays at the ports. And by that, I mean ships are waiting now 4.5 to 5 days to get into a U.S. port of entry just to start the unloading process. Freight costs have increased. We've read several articles and passed around several articles, which I'm sure you've seen some of, but the cost of a 40-foot container coming from Asia to the United States is pushing $5,000 to over $5,000. Those containers, or cans as we call them in the trade, had been available at a cost of around $1,500 to $1,900 a year ago. Now, the shortages you're experiencing of everything, bicycles, clothing, parts and accessories, rubber, tires, tubes, wheels, right now that's all projected to continue out through 12 to 18 months from February of 2021. So the bottom line is, as I said before, there is no on-demand warehouse inventory. There's none right now that's being projected to be available to you, especially retailers, until 2022, a year from now. Now, we're going to spend some time on predictions. And I want to be careful here as we discuss this because there is depth to every one of these, and I wanted to keep them simple and to the point for this presentation, and also put them in language that is easily understandable for all of us, lay people as well. This first point I think is important, deja vu. Remember Yogi Berra? Some of you are old enough to remember Yogi Berra. He was a catcher with the Dodgers. And he also managed the Dodgers after they moved to Las Vegas. Yogi Berra was famous for his sayings, and one of them is deja vu all over again. And if the vaccines that we're now getting, I just got my first vaccine shot this week, but what we don't know, what the scientists don't know, what the epidemiologists and the scientists are working on is to give us answers as to whether those vaccines will prevent transmission of the disease of COVID-19. If the vaccines do not prevent transmissions, 2021 will be a lot like 2020 for the IBD, for the independent dealer channel. What do I mean by that? Well, if the vaccines will protect me, but in turn, I'm still a carrier, or I can still transmit the COVID, then I certainly will continue to wear a mask, will socially distance, and will be particularly careful when I'm out and about and when I'm interfacing with other people. That has been a major issue relative to in-person retailing. And if the vaccines do not prevent transmission, it'll continue to be a problem through the year until we're told by the Center for Disease Control and for the scientists again, until we're told that the vaccines will prevent transmission, till we reach a point where you can no longer have to be cautious and wear a mask, socially distance, etc. But that's going to impact especially bike retailers and other retailers, because you'll have to keep doing what you're doing now. Now, what this leads to is the crisis has accelerated retail omni-channel. And as you can see, pure plays are the direct-to-consumer online entities, curbside pickup, and home delivery and service, which have all accelerated. One of the projections I've seen, and we'll have to see if the percentages hold going forward into 2021, 2022, is that the consumer shopping online, that as a consumer habit has increased in the first year of the COVID 2020 by what we had been projecting in the retail trade as what would happen in the next 10 years. So it's been, as we say, the crisis has accelerated the omni-channel, which is retail and to online sales. Think the bike shops that are working with their websites and their web providers to provide online sales and service to consumers through their websites. Think Walmart in the bigger world, or not Toys R Us, the Target store chains and others. What we've also seen is pure plays cropping up. We had one of our regular Friday morning meetings with our Human Powered Solutions team of partners and senior associates this morning, and we were talking about some of the brands we found and their online brands. We were looking at their websites, and we were particularly struck by the company that was featured in the playoff games over the weekend in the Microsoft commercials. And I won't reference the name here, but there was a bike company that is a pure play in New York City that was factored into the Microsoft commercial. I'm sure they were very happy with that and what the costs were. But the online bike brands and companies are cropping up all over. And that's part of another trend that occurred during the crisis, which is in the United States in particular, is a dramatic increase in the number of entrepreneurs. But that doesn't radically affect these forecasts, so we're not going to dwell on that. We think in 2021, supply chains will be challenged. I mean, they already have been. Look at the previous slides. Supply chains are challenged in the bicycle industry and the e-bike business, but they're going to start to rebalance. And that essentially goes to a key question that's come up during the pandemic, and it'll continue on into 2022, 2023, possibly out for 5 years. Where should brands make products? It's a key question. Right now, China is, as I said, about 85 to 87% of all of the bicycles that are sold in the US market last year came from mainland China. The year previous, that number was 95%. So it's come down slightly, but still China represents a huge percentage of bicycles from the top end to the low end that are imported into the United States. I think it's abundantly clear at this point that the current administration is not going to change much relative to the importation of goods from China that was established in the previous administration. Different reasons for it, and there'll be a different USTR, the United States Special Trade Rep. There'll be different approaches to the Chinese question, but where this impacts on companies and impacts on companies in the bicycle and the e-bike business is the key question of where should brands make products? And this is both a practical supply chain question, and it unfortunately is also a political question. So the beginnings of that will begin to impact the supply chain, although we don't see it moving appreciably away from mainland China or Southeast Asia. It is going to be an issue that'll move forward from 2021 and be part and parcel of what has to be considered relative to the rebalancing of the bicycle and e-bike supply chain going forward. We also don't see any increase in on-demand inventory. So we'll just repeat that. 2021, no appreciable change. There will be shortages. There's going to be no more than a month's worth of inventory in the pipe. And so the shortages will continue because there's going to be no way to build an on-demand inventory. Now, one of the issues you should watch very carefully is go to your Bicycle Retailer and Industry News, the November issue. I'm looking at it now. Go to page 14. Look at the U.S. imports trailing 12 months, November 2020. You can go right down to the bottom and look at the column that's headed world total units. And what I want to point out here goes back to the issue of the drawdown of the inventory you as bike shops carried as part and parcel of what happened here when the demand went up, and where that inventory went, which is it got sold because of the demand from consumers. The key is that if you look at the totals, November 2018, imports totaled 16,579,000 units. 2009 through November, and these are 12-month, which means it rolls 12 months forward. It's not 12-month year to date. That'll happen next month. But for the 2019 through November on a rolling 12-month basis, the total was 13,681,000. That was down 17.5% from the previous year, 2018. The total for November 2020 is 15,890,000, up 16.10% from 2019, but still not to the number of 16.6 million that was brought in that same time frame in November 2018. Where was the difference? Well, it's simple. It was in inventory. Was that all held by wholesalers? No, because the practice in the United States, at least, has been for inventory to be pushed out to retailers. And we could discuss the pros and cons of that, but you sold it. You sold it to consumers because the demand went up and then you couldn't get more. And all I'm pointing out is that the imports coming into the United States did not replenish and will not replenish until this import number changes and either increases or is equal to the demand. We're also saying expect another wave of price increases and perhaps further tightening of terms as the end result of the shortage. You've already seen one price increase. You've already experienced further tightening of terms. I don't think I have to go into the detail, but you know what they are. And we full well expect in 2021 that you should expect another wave of price increases and perhaps further tightening of terms through the first 3 quarters of this year. Now, what are you going to do with that? Probably pass it on to the consumer. From the standpoint of positives, green, we think, is the color of recovery, and that you should be looking very carefully at both your suppliers, at your store, at your location in the store, and more importantly, what your municipal government is doing, and also pay close attention to what the League of American Bicyclists tells you about what's occurring in Washington. We have a new Secretary of Transportation who in his previous life was the mayor of a mid-sized city in Indiana, and in turn was really an advocate for the smart streets and for bicycles and walking. The administration has shown that they, in turn, through other departments as well as the presidency itself, are very supportive of bicycles and walking. And believe it or not, both parties and both chambers in the Congress of the United States showed last year in the legislation that they moved forward, which did not pass, but the Senate and the House put bills on the table relative to the transportation infrastructure that were very favorable to biking and to walking. Now, the environmental movement and the environmental crisis are part and parcel of what is making green the color of recovery. And I think the brands in this country, the bicycle brands, the e-bike brands, as well as the bike shops and the retailers are going to have to take this very seriously not only in the way they operate their businesses, but in the brands they represent and sell to the consuming public, in the packaging, all the issues related to the environment. But they all are going to ring positive for the bike business, and they'll contribute to what we're going to call a net gain, which you'll see later in the predictions for the 2021-2022 year. Lastly, in this particular set, weather and the climate crisis, which is part and parcel of what we just discussed, will play a growing role in both demand patterns on the part of the consumer, logistics, and the supply chain. What do I mean? Well, at this point, the climate crisis is creating weather events. What we saw through 2020 and going into it in 2019 is hot weather in Houston, Texas was driving more cyclists during the heat of the summer indoors. And indoor cycling had grown. It's not just the gyms shutting down and people wanting to exercise and get exercise in their homes. There is a weather component. In some markets, it's too hot, or the weather, it's too cold. You've also got situations where the wildfires make it impossible to go out and ride in the smog and the smoke. And it's taking the avid cyclist and the enthusiast cyclist indoors. So that's one piece on the demand pattern side. Logistics. There were over 9,000 20-foot equivalent containers lost at sea in the last 2.5 months. What's happening is all those ships that are out there waiting to get into Port of LA and Port of San Diego and coming across the ocean are subject to more storms, to more violent wave action. The shipping industry built bigger ships to carry more containers and stack them higher, and now they're running into wave patterns that are forcing those containers to drop off the ships, to get blown off, waved off, to tip. And so losing 9,000 20-foot equivalents so far is just the beginning. And that also is playing into insurance, by the way. As one of our experts, I mentioned Dave Carnebogue is a logistics expert, but that's the logistics piece. And it also could affect other issues of in-country freight. And then the supply chain itself, as to weather events that will shut down factories, that will shut down the movement of containers from a factory or a port to a factory with componentry, and from a factory where OEM manufacturing is occurring to a port to ship finished goods. So weather is going to become more of a factor that's going to have to be looked at seriously. And this goes to another issue that in 2021, 2022, risk management and looking at the risks that companies face, looking at the risks in supply chains, and risks like, will weather cause a 2-week delay or a month's delay? Will we inevitably run into more containers being dropped off at sea, being blown off or waved off these container vessels until they figure out how to strap them on? Will weather play more of a role in disrupting the flow of goods? And how will we deal with that? And how will the supply chain react? And how will companies deal with it? So 2022, and we've put these 2 years together because 2021 is going to be unpredictable. In particular, while the vaccines are welcome, while we need them very badly, as I mentioned early on, if the vaccines are not going to deal with the spread of the COVID virus, then we're going to have a year pretty muchly in 2021 like 2022 relative to social distancing, masks, and all of the issues that we need to do to keep each other safe in this environment and to keep the disease itself from spreading rapidly across the country. So 2022, we believe the COVID crisis will be under control and that America and the world can open up again. Now, one of the things that I didn't mention in 2021 relative to these restrictions is product managers who used to travel regularly to China, to Vietnam, to Cambodia, to Taiwan, that visited the key suppliers, that visited the key manufacturers. They went to Osaka, Japan to visit Shimano. They haven't been able to travel, not the Americans. Because of the way in which we have not controlled the disease and the spread of the disease, if I wanted to go to Taiwan right now and I got through all of the things in the United States I would need to do to get an airplane ticket, when I arrived in Taiwan, I would be put into quarantine for 2 weeks, which my company would have to pay for. I would be checked every day, maybe twice a day. And if I violated sitting in the hotel the government put me into and monitored me, I would be fined. If I do it a second time, I'd be taken out of the country. I'd be deported. So there aren't a lot of product managers traveling in Taiwan right now, particularly the Americans. There's not a lot of us traveling in the product management or the logistics side of the business in mainland China, nor Vietnam, nor Cambodia, nor any of the points of manufacturing. And while that needs to be dealt with, that's also part of the issue here, why COVID-19 and why that crisis being under control and while the spread of the disease being under control is so important to us. The markets will not open up until it's under control and there's no longer transmission at the levels that there is now. We think that comes either the fourth quarter of 2021 or the first quarter of 2022. For the bike industry, it means product managers, purchasing managers will be able to freely travel in the countries where product is made. Now that in turn will help the communication, and also it's going to have an effect on the whole product, the logistics of the product management process. Now, we think that 2022 is also going to be a mixed economic recovery. You've already seen some of the employment issues this year, but despite the good efforts of the current administration, of the Congress, it's still going to be a mixed economic recovery. And you're going to see pandemic-induced changes in shopping behavior. They were very evident in 2021 in the review where we said online, omni-channel, pure play in the bike business will increase. It'll increase in the whole of the retail world. Consumers like it. Consumers are not just concerned about, I don't want to shop at a store, but they also like the idea of being able to shop online. Consumers that never did that before, like me, are finding, gee, it's delightful to shop for groceries online and then just drive over to the store and pick the stuff up, have them load it in the back of the car. But now we've got real changes occurring off of that base. So consumer behavior has irrevocably changed. It's changing for bicycle retail. It's changing for the way we approach consumers, how we service them, how we deliver product to them. It's going to be in full bloom as we get into 2022. Retailers that have not prepared for that have not worked at changing the way they serve consumers are going to have problems if they are not looking at how this pandemic-induced changes in shopping behavior have affected American consumers. Supply chains will rebalance and shift. It'll finally come. The rebalancing and shifting, by the way, shouldn't be looked at as, gee, we're just going to move stuff to Vietnam, or we're just going to move the bike business to Cambodia, or hey, we're going to bring the bike business into the US. That will take time. In fact, the reshoring into the US is not a short-term activity because there's no supply here. There are no component suppliers appreciable. Component suppliers that manufacture in this country, there's some headquartered here, but they manufacture in Asia. To come into the United States to set up viable component manufacturing before you do assembly and you do bicycle manufacturing is a major undertaking, and it's certainly not done in 1 year. But the beginnings, the rebalancing, the shifting is all going to be moving in earnest in 2022, because the events that are going to drive, the catastrophic events that are going to drive the risk management are going to look very clearly at what would occur if we have a weather event. When will weather events be under control and abate? How will they affect the shipping, the logistics? In turn, what we're going to be looking for is that shorter supply line, so that when there is a black swan event like the pandemic, we're not going to be laid up for 2 years or have a 2-year recovery in our industry. we're going to be able to deal with the crisis in a shorter period of time because we have different, more efficient supply chains. And that rebalancing and that shifting is going to start in 2021, but will drive in earnest in 2022 when the COVID is under control and we've opened up travel and the ability of product managers, purchasing people, executives to move freely into the various countries that are both consuming countries like America and producing countries like China. And finally, here's the big piece, the bubble's going to pop. And without going into a lot of detail as to what we think, and we rediscussed this morning, you know that the on-demand inventories are just not available right now, won't build for a period of time. But the reason I took you back to these import figures to look at is to point out that until we get a reduction in demand, you're not going to have the ability for the supply chain to catch up and put on-demand inventory into either dealer stores or wholesale inventories. That means the bubble pops because the demand is reduced. How much, we're not sure. But we do know that it will be reduced. So the bubble, we feel, will pop between the fourth quarter of 2021 and the first quarter of 2022. This is when on-demand inventory will build, when you'll see imports return to the 2018, 2017, 2016 timeframes. Those price increases that occurred last year, this year, and we think will occur at least one more time this year, will turn into price wars. And they'll drive wholesale and retail markets. Terms and restrictions, they'll be removed. Makes no sense for a brand to tell you that you got to pay for it in advance or you can't cancel an order or there's a penalty when they've got demand inventory available. And independent dealers in the United States, specialty bicycle retailers, will have for the first time in decades a real opportunity to change the way they do business. Now, that goes as much to negotiating authorized dealer agreements as anything else, and I'm not going to belabor this presentation with that detail, but there is a huge opportunity coming in 2022 for IBDs to change the way they do business for the better. And then lastly, the markets, the bicycle market, the e-bike market in the United States is going to find a new net gain level. We don't think it's going to go back to what we saw in 2019, but we do look to it, and possibly not going back to what it was in 2021 or 2020, but we do look to it being at a level between 2018, as we say here, and 2021. That primarily the greening or the green effect, that ability or that need to embrace the environmental concerns, to embrace what can be done to bring environmental sanity to the market. And what's happened right now in the walking and the bicycling community, as far as the interest municipalities have in extending the bike routes, extending the bike lanes, making it safer for people to ride bikes and e-bikes, is all going to be on the plus side. Plus, as I said, to my surprise, we've got a Congress that last year was willing to do a lot. This year looks like it's willing to do more, along with an administration that's going to be very supportive all the way down to the municipal level. So the bottom line is that 2022 is the beginnings of a new era for the American bicycle business and the e-bike business, where both markets are going to find a net gain level between 2018 and 2020, higher than what it's been. But we think that the bloom is off the rose, that the bubble will pop, and that what's been predicted as an ongoing boom is going to diminish. And we're going to have to look for where that new level net gain is. We think to the advantage of the business as we go forward. So this is to give you food for thought, to give you key points, to begin to think about what you could apply here for your business planning. And if you're interested in more information, you can email my partner, Brad Hughes. And by the way, my thanks to my partner, Mike Fritz, for producing this for me. But you could email or contact Brad at humanpoweredsolutions.com. His phone number is on the screen, 1-805-901-9772, or check us out on our website, www.humanpoweredsolutions.com. And thank you. Have a great day. Stay safe. Be well.